friends. We are here today in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I think there is a raindrop right on the lens. There we go. We are here in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And there's a lot of metaphors that are being used in this chapter. So I'll just kind of go through. I think there are four metaphors to make his main point. So the first metaphor is he's saying in the beginning that he's talking, of course, to the church in Corinth, but he could be talking to us also. He's saying you guys are not spiritual. You know, in the last chapter, he was talking about how things are discerned by the Spirit. You need to use the Holy Spirit in you to understand what the Holy Spirit is doing in the world. And so he's saying, you guys, I wouldn't call you spiritual. And he says, when I came to you, you guys were like babies. You know, I gave you the gospel. You know, I gave you the bare bones of it. And that's the first metaphor. It's like they're babies. And he's like, I gave you milk, not solid food, because you weren't ready for it. And his point was that the milk is the gospel. It's the subtle understanding of Jesus, but the solid food is also all about Jesus. You know, it's how to live your life. It's just understanding more and more. And these things are discerned by the Spirit. And so he goes on to his second metaphor, where he's saying like he's saying, look at me and look at Apollos. And he's saying, what are we? He was saying, you're being fleshly. And he's like, what are we? Obviously they're just people. They're not, you don't connect to God through Paul or through Apollos or through Peter. You connect to God through connecting with God. And so that's the point that he's making here. And he's saying, what are we but workers? And he's like, I planted the seed. Apollos is helping it grow. And he's like, but how is it growing? It's not growing through me. It's not growing through Apollos. It's not growing through Cephas. God is making it grow. I think this is an interesting point because the way that things grow today are still a mystery. You put this little seed in there and then it becomes a big tree. And we don't know how this happens. This is kind of related, but it's interesting to me the things that science just can't tell us, even in this day where we feel like, everything is explained by science. But I was listening to a podcast called Radiolab a while back, and they were talking about lightning. And this guy, who is a scientist, said, we don't even understand lightning. And, the hosts of the show were saying, what do you mean we don't understand lightning? Like, we know why it happens. And he's like, oh, of course, we say why what we observe happening. And he's like, there's the static in the clouds and there's all this, but we scientists have no understanding of why so much power comes straight from the sky like that. When we do our calculations and our understanding, we still cannot explain it. All of this all of this scientific knowledge, and we can't figure out something as simple as lightning. And so, Paul is saying here, we don't understand how it grows. It just grows. It's God that makes it grow. So he moves on to the next metaphor. And he's saying, I came along like a master builder, and I laid the foundation. And then he's saying, and then other people will build upon it. Now, this part always makes me think of, I went to St. Louis a while ago, and there's the St. Louis Arch. I don't know if you've ever seen the St. Louis Arch, but it is much more impressive in real life than I ever thought that it was. But they said that when they laid the foundation for the St. Louis Arch, they had to lay a foundation on one side and the other, and then it had to build up and then meet perfectly in the middle. And they said if the foundation was off by as much as a playing card, you put a playing card on one side and it moves up and you get to the top, the two sides of the St. Louis Arch would completely miss on the top. You know, the base of it is a building and you put one card under it and then the whole thing would move over enough so that the two ends wouldn't even pass each other. They wouldn't even touch at all. They would completely go to one side and the other. And so Paul is saying, I laid this foundation. And again, he's pointing them not to himself, but to Christ. He said, I laid this foundation. And he said, other people will be building off. Will be building off of this foundation. One of them being Apollos. And he's saying, if you put anything on this foundation, you know, other than, you know, the things that God's making, that, you know, if you're, he makes a list. He's like, if it's gold or silver or fine stones, you know, he's starting off with things that are more likely to stay, and then he's saying, or wood or straw, you know, things that are more likely to burn. He's like, when the fire comes, it's going to be revealed for what it is. You know, if you build a foundation of a church, and your foundation is built off of anything other than the Holy Spirit, you know, other than the gospel, other than, you know, the truths of God, then, you know, when the fire comes, it's going to be revealed for what it is. You know, it's worldly. It's not eternal. It's not heavenly. So his last metaphor he makes here is, he said, don't you know that you are a temple of the Holy Spirit? Now, when he says you, he's not talking to individuals. I've heard it explained before that it would be more accurate to say it's y'all. It's you, plural. And he says, don't you know that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit? You know, that everybody understood, you know, the temple, you know, especially the Jews there in Corinth. You know, the temple is where you go to worship. And he's saying, you are the temple now. You know, God, we don't meet with God in the temple. We meet with God in ourselves. You know, the Holy Spirit is not in a building. The Holy Spirit is in us. And so he's saying, don't you know that you are the temple? And so these things are, you know, these things are not worldly. They are spiritual things, and then he brings it back to his main point. Like, don't be divided in the church, because there's just this one Spirit, and we're connecting to God through the Spirit. And me and Apollos and, you know, and Peter, and basically everybody that you know that is doing work for God, they're just people. So I just want to make this comment here. You know, I know a lot of people who will look at leaders in the church, you know, whether it be public figures or leaders in your church, and they'll say, you know, these flawed people, I just don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I can handle how messed up the church is. You know, everybody in the church is messed up. And so, but you have to know that as much as you might like one person and not like another one, everyone will let you down. The only thing that you can count on, absolutely, is God. And so if you were going to a church and you left your church because the people let you down, and you know, that made you leave your faith was not connected to God. Your faith was connected to that church. And so you didn't really have a real faith at all. And if you're in a church, I would encourage you to have a certain amount of forgiveness. Don't don't leave a church because the people are not perfect. So that is 1 Corinthians chapter 3. All right, have a great day. Bye.